So, what we're going to cover today are really in sort of four sections. One is really identifying what common broken organizational systems look like. We will then understand the impact of these, and especially on leadership behavior and organizational culture. We'll then explore that correlation between leadership and leadership behaviors, those human connections, and engagement of employees. And we will then provide some actionable strategies and key takeaways. So, on that note, I want to introduce our wonderful panel. And our panel is formed from the experts of Healthy Minds Club. So, we have Vinita, who is a people and culture advisor, and Vinita loves building Lego. So that's one of the key things about Vinita. And we'll talk about that a little bit more, Vinita, in a sec. We have Rose, and Rose is an executive and transition coach. Um, and the interesting thing about Rose here is she lifts weights and she does kickboxing. And when she doesn't do that, she's not the best version of herself. So watch out, everybody, for the kickboxer there. And finally, we have Sharon, who is an executive and leadership coach and the CEO and Chief Heart Officer of the Humanity Works Consultancy. And back in 2011, Sharon actually traveled to 12 countries across 4 continents and navigated different cultures. So that was just an experience in itself. So on that note, I don't know if Vinita, if there's anything else you want to sort of quickly say to the audience about you. 60 seconds.
Yeah, absolutely. So my work has spanned 3 continents, 14 different countries. So I've worked with HR and leadership teams across the globe, implementing HR systems, policies, and helping them detox their organizations. And for me, Lego really comes into how creatively I work with teams and people across. So you build something.
Wonderful, excellent. Yeah, I used to love playing Lego when I was a kid, for sure. And thank you for that, Vanita. Rose, what about you?
I want to first assure you and reassure you that I've worked out today and I weight trained and kickbox, so you don't have to guard
Good to
your
know.
your
Good to know.
face, even virtually. I'd like also to share that I've been in this part of the world, in the Gulf, namely in Dubai, for 25 years. And I've had the opportunity to really get to know 200 cultures, to work with as many diversity as possible, as much diversity as possible. And that has created a lot of synergy in the work that I do, but also virtually, I cover every territory. So I'm grateful for that.
Very good. Thank you for that. And we're glad you've done your exercise this morning. So we feel a lot safer right now. But there you go. And Sharon.
Thank you, Prem. It's lovely to be here with all of you. So, as Prem said, I'm Sharon Parmer. I am the Chief Heart Officer and CEO of Humanity Works Consultancy. I work with fast-scaling companies who have a revenue of 100 million recurring revenue and are looking to take the next stage of growth in their organization. And I work with them to build a culture that is really going to fuel the next level of growth in that organization. I am a former corporate leader. I worked across 3 different continents over 20 years, leading strategy and digital transformation in organizations. So I have both the lived experience as well as the technical knowledge of really delivering true growth in organizations.
Great. Thank you, Sharon. Wonderful. A lot of experience there. So we've got a wonderful panel. So I'm going to get straight into the questions because this is the key thing for this webinar and to get going with it. And also for the audience, if you have any questions or any comments, please feel free to share them in the chat. So Sharon, I'm going to start with you. Let's talk about understanding organizational systems. So what do we mean by organizational systems?
Yeah, it's a good question, isn't it? Because all organizations will have systems in them. And I think right now, organizations, we have to think of them like ecosystems. They are made up of systems, people, processes, partnerships. And within those ecosystems, within those organizations, we have what we call people systems and profit systems. And those people and profit systems are what shape a lot of how we show up at work. They tell us how we will be rewarded for our work. They tell us how we should work together. And put very simply, systems shape behaviors and behaviors shape the culture.
Yeah.
And that shapes the output and the outcomes that that organization will actually achieve and deliver. And so when we're looking at those systems, we're really looking at actually what is it that they are telling people to do in the organization in order to be successful. So I'll give you an example because I think these things are
Yeah,
easier
sure.
to understand via examples. Let's say you're the chief sales officer of a sales department within a SaaS company or any kind of tech company. And your sales reps have individual quotas that they need to achieve. That is the system that would deliver the profit. So they think, right, I've got to work hard. I've got to make sure I hit that target. The second system you have in place is you say, we want a culture of collaboration. We want people to work together. Now, what's happening here? The two systems, they're in conflict. Because on the one hand, we say, in order for you to make money, you have to individually hit that sales target. On the other hand, we say, we want you to work together. Now, people are confused. The two systems are telling them two very different
Right.
things. What
Yeah.
is it that people will actually focus on is actually making money because that's what they're going to get rewarded on.
Yeah.
Where you have systems that exist in conflict, it breaks trust. And where
Okay.
trust gets broken, you will see productivity levels drop, engagement levels drop, and ultimately we will be removing the joy of work. Because
Yeah.
at the end of the day, that's what all of us want to do. We want to come in, do a great job, have a great time at work, and actually deliver great outcomes.
Yeah.
And so it's important for us as leaders, depending on where you sit in the organization and depending on what control you have over those systems, but it is incumbent upon us to think about actually, have I designed the systems that will actually get me the outcomes and the outputs that I desire for this organization in order for us to be able to satisfy shareholders, the various stakeholders in the business, customers, clients, and the people who work in that business.
Yeah, look, it's all about the joy at work, right? We all want to have a nice, joyful place to work. So thank you for that. Thanks for opening that up. And so, a lot of what you touched on was about dysfunctional organizations and the impact of it. So, Rose, let me come to you. What are those sort of, I know Sharon touched on a few, but some common symptoms and of dysfunctional organizations, and why does that matter?
Well, symptoms come in waves and forms and shapes and colors, but they start with signs that most of the times we ignore. And we give them different labels and different names. It could be disengagement, it could be coffee badging, it could be quiet quitting, but even quitting physically. I
Coffee,
like to
I've not heard that one. What's that one?
Coffee batting is like when you're totally disengaged because you've lost trust and you've lost joy in where you are, and then you come and drink your coffee, but you're actually not really working. You're physically present, but you're not there.
Okay.
And then you have the quiet quitting, and then you have the actual quitting sometimes, or staying forever in a place that drains you. I'd like to refer to that with one name, and it comes in different dosages. Resentment. So you
Mm.
become resentful to the workplace and eventually resentful to yourself. And that's a one-way ticket once it happens. It becomes irreversible once it really
Yeah.
is pretty much consolidated.
Okay. Thank
Yeah,
you
so
for
these
that.
are the symptoms.
Yeah.
It becomes a syndrome actually, and the syndrome
Mm.
becomes burnout and becomes bore out. And so we're used to burnout because we're so tired and exhausted, but bore out is actually you're depleted because you're so unfulfilled. And these
Mm.
are the two syndromes that accompany resentment because the trust is broken.
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah, thank you for your insights there, Rose. So, Vanita, you've been in the HR world, many, many years. What sort of, do you have any specific examples, or case studies where, from industries where you've either experienced or where people have experienced these type of systems?
Yeah, absolutely. And I really like because what Sharon and Rose have said, the examples I'm going to give are going to demonstrate how the breakdown happens. And I really like what both of them, like have talked about. So the first example I'm going to talk about happened to me. This is a real world example. So I had accountability, but no authority. Now, I was in a head of rewards role. I was responsible for salary increases, incentive planning, and presenting recommendations to senior leadership. But there was one issue. I did not have access to the data that I was working with. And the person who had access to the data would not share it. And there was no accountability for it. Like there was no consequences. So imagine this. I'm responsible for making strategic recommendation. I'm presenting to executives, but I'm operating partially blind. And this was not a capability issue. That was a systems issue. So we had a situation where information is controlled instead of shared, and then performance became political instead of strategic. And I'd like to give another example, if I may.
Sure.
And this is where, as a very senior leader, was untouchable, and this person broke the system entirely. So they regularly yelled at their team. They were openly misogynistic. They made people work late unnecessarily, and they demonstrated behaviors that visibly violated the company's stated value. But nothing happened. Why?
Wow.
Because this individual had the trust of someone in authority, and the system protected them. And when a system protects bad behavior at the top, it signals to everyone else that respect doesn't matter and that power matters more than values. I can go on.
Yeah, those are great examples, and I just don't see I just don't ever see the need of yelling at people in a company, to your team. I just don't see the point of that. I've experienced it where people have yelled, at the team, and you just got to think, why are they doing that? There's a real spark or something's just not working there. Rose, just to touch on that. So all of those things influence leadership behavior and leadership styles, right? So, but how do these broken systems really influence that leadership style? Because you could go into a company and be very positive and engaging leader, but very quickly the organization breaks you down. What happens?
In terms of leadership styles, right?
Yeah.
So I'll start by what is missing, and I'll tell you what is present. Because again, there's no one style of leadership. It's actually a bit of a spectrum. But what is missing is absolutely what we call the compassionate radical candor. It's not there. It's actually unclear, and unclear is unkind. So this is what is there. But in terms of styles, I mean, the best way to put it is that there's ambivalence. So one day the person is passive aggressive, the second day is aggressive, and the third day they also might be, or a different kind of leader. They might be like what we call insincere with their manipulation. But they're anything but like compassionate and clear and having the right communication. So this is pretty much the best way to put it, because again, we can't like box all leaders that
Yeah.
aren't really communicating and nurturing trust with one or two leadership style. There's really a big spectrum where kindness, clarity, and compassion are missing.
Mm. Yeah, excellent. Really good points. I mean, just to open it up as a conversation to the panel, and so rebuilding trust is the key theme here. So obviously being transparent and building that trust, and then the impact or the ripple effect on teams and the dynamic. I mean, just generally, what is the role of trust and transparency in today's leadership? Because we've talked about, it's probably been there for many years, but now we talk about trust and transparency even more than ever before. What's the panel's view? Whoever wants to go.
So, Uh,
Sorry.
no, absolutely. Okay. The one thing I was going to say is that trust is not just about transparency. Trust is actually integrity and reliability, and it is demonstrated over time and it's built daily. It's not in big speeches or town halls. It's about consistent actions. How are people behaving? Are you doing what you say you will do? And are you acting in alignment with your values? And it comes from the top. It also comes from below.
Okay.
That's my starting point.
Yeah. Rose
Uh,
or Sharon, any
yeah,
point?
so I would say, I mean, echo everything that Rose and Vinita have expertly said already. What I would say is, Prem, you asked, what is the role of trust and transparency? And why is this important right now? And I
Yeah.
think we need to look at the world that we're living in, because we're living in a time of intense chaos, disruption, and change. And where we used to have organizations that existed of hierarchical systems, which are very much lending itself to command and control style of leadership, they don't work in the world that we're in now.
Mm.
So we actually have to be able to come together as teams. We need leaders who have high degrees of emotional intelligence to be able to create the emotional safety to facilitate open and honest dialogue around what needs to be done and how we're going to work this out together. Like I said at the beginning, organizations are ecosystems.
Yeah.
And in a world of constant change and chaos and disruption, that means leaders need to see themselves as orchestrators. They're like conductors in an orchestra. And actually, they need to really be able to bring people together, the connection. And Vinita talked about it earlier, the accountability. They need to be across the entire piece so that actually people know what they're doing. Rose talked about it, the clarity, the compassion, the trust. And as Vinita said, the trust is built in the day to day. I want to bring in Brené Brown at this stage. I don't know if anyone's aware of her trust jar analogy, but she talks about how, there you go, Rose has got the trust jar. So she talks about how the day-to-day interactions, particularly that leaders have with the people in their organizations, are a lot of what determines whether there are high enough levels of trust to be able to speed up the flow of work and communication so that work actually gets done effectively. So say, for example, you've got Dave, who's the CEO of an organization. He finds out that Steve in accounting, his mum is having chemotherapy right now because she's got cancer. Dave walks over to Steve and says, "Hey, Steve, I want to check in and find out how your mum's getting on. I know she's having chemotherapy. It must be a really trying time. Let us know how we can support you in the right way." The moment that happens, he picks up a marble, metaphorically, he puts it in his jar for Dave, and he's like, "I trust Dave.
Right.
Trust Dave because Dave's just communicated to me that I matter to him." And so it is these small daily human interactions that
Yeah.
fundamentally build trust. When Vinita talked about how she held herself to a high account and made sure she was doing her work, but her colleague didn't do that in the same way, that broke her trust, not just in that colleague, but in the system that's designed to actually help Vinita
Yeah.
to do her work, allegedly. She's ready to roll up her sleeves
Yeah.
and do her work, but now she's been let down. And that trust then becomes irreversible and then leads to everything that Rose articulated in the beginning, the quiet quitting, the coffee badgering, which
Coffee
I had not
badger.
heard of either, but I'm
And the
enjoying greatly.
resentment. Oh my
Resent,
God, the
right.
resentment. I think that is such a spot on word because if you're not actively engaged, you are disengaged, and disengaged employees are lethal within an organization.
And
Mm.
you know, the worst sort and form and level of resentment is self-resentment, because there will be a time where after resenting your boss, you're gonna resent the entire organization, but you're gonna
Mm.
also resent yourself because you have abandoned yourself and you have allowed this to happen and stayed in this. I just wanted to add to the to what we were discussing, transparency and trust. It's it's a common thing that we confuse transparency with clarity. And
Hmm.
trust is not about
Yeah.
transparency. And not everything has to be communicated to every shareholder and to every team member. But clarity is a requirement on what is communicated and what is not. And also the human aspect, the compassion. Well, and again, another requirement. But what isn't is friendship, is family, is engaging in conversations that are not part of trusting one another. Like, yes, the mom has chemotherapy in the example that you have given, Sharon, but it's not a requirement to have a conversation about what are your plans on Saturday evening. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, of
there are a
course.
lot of
Yeah.
blurred boundaries and structures and alliances and designed relationships that need to be put in place so that what is trust to you is trust to me and trusted and trusting,
Mm.
right? It's a
Yeah.
two-way thing. It's not you trusting the boss, it's also the boss trusting you. And this
Mhm.
is what
Yeah.
every team member forgets about. I need to
I,
trust my boss, but it's not a requirement that that boss trust me equally.
yeah, I mean, you've all made some excellent points, and there's so much insight, and we can unravel this. But all of what you've said, in my mind, is going back to there's just so much. There seems to be a lot of pressure on today's leaders to think about so many different aspects of that organization and the impact of that individual, me as an individual, if I'm a leader, on every single person in the team, how I need to behave, how I show up, and those little micro moments. Sharon, you mentioned it's like little moments, those micro moments that create better trust. Yeah, Vanita, I want to come straight to you on a question. So, how do leaders become more effective when you are in today's world trying to think about all of these different ways I have to behave throughout the day?
It's a great question. It's not easy being a leader. It's not easy being a middle manager. They say with power comes responsibility. Shakespeare said that, right? And the thing is, I think one thing leaders have to remember is that news travels. How you behave, it doesn't stop at your team. At the end of the day, it's impacting your customer. So this is where no one talks about what trust, disengagement, all of that does, right? So it reaches the front lines. It shapes how employees treat customers. It influences how problems are solved. So if you want high engagement and high performance and loyal customers, you have to start with integrity. That is crucial. So walk your talk. So if you say, for example, if a leader says, and I've had this, if we say that deadlines are important, but then leaders are missing internal deadlines, it's communicating that deadlines are flexible for me, right? And if you say that, hey, I trust you as an employee, like you're on my team, I trust Prem, but I want Prem to come into the office every single day. That's not trust.
Mm.
That's surveillance disguised as leadership. So the first thing about in terms of engagement, it's really everyone being held to the same standards, not different standards. Prem's department cannot have a different standard than Sharon's department, than Rose's department. And if we say, for example, work starts at 8:30, it's archaic, but there are still organizations that exist. And they have their reasons for it, right? Work starts at 8:30. Work starts at 8:30 for everyone. So
Mm.
it's really being consistent in the application of our values, of what we say, and it's really about everyone walking the talk. So if we say flow of information is important within departments, that has to be
Okay.
supported, that has to be enabled.
Yeah, no, look, there's so much to unpick in that specific space, but in leadership effectiveness today, in blurred lines of hybrid working, and all of that, it becomes even harder, right? So how does one go by? I mean, I suppose, Rose, question to you, how does one redesign an organizational system that works across blurred lines?
Oh, I mean, maybe that's a bit of a utopia, but I'm dreaming and I'm working toward having in place the urge to work preventively rather than correctively. Because this is what happens when trust is eroded and corroded like multiple times. There comes a time when it's irreversible and it cannot be repaired and is restored. But if you have scratches one time after the other, yes, you could send this to the workshop and you could have it repaired. So the best way to look at it is this is how I personally see trust. And this is when I'm delivering a workshop, this is what I invite people to look at it in this perspective. Trust is like a platform, but it's on the leader to invite the team members to the platform. So the leader initiates this, and most of the time, this is what is missing. The leader assumes that the team members are meant to onboard on a platform that doesn't exist to start with. So here's a platform, the leader onboards team members to the platform. And then from there, it's equally on team members to exhibit trust and to be trusted and trusting. But the initiation is actually what's missing. And once the team members, even when they're onboarded, they're not held accountable enough to show the trust that it's meant to be. And also, there's my favorite way to structure
Sure.
trust. I didn't see Sharon bringing this up. I'm
Yeah, of
happy you
course.
did. Like
Yeah.
everyone needs to have either a physical or even in metaphorically a trust jar, but I like the physical one. And it's a two-way thing. You literally put marbles, but you equally remove marbles. And what we miss is the fact that the marble jar isn't meant to be full because there won't be a time when it's full.
Yeah.
It has to be full enough for you to trust the person. But if and you do one thing and it could drain the entire marbles, and
Yeah.
when you have this,
That's
this
brilliant.
is rupture. Like this is no more trust. And most of the times it's hard to refill it.
Prem, can I come in on that question that you
Yeah,
asked? What can
absolutely.
leaders do and how can
Yeah.
they design it? So there's three things that you need to look at as a leader. Number one is how am I going to role model this, what it is that I want? Number two, how can I operationalize it? And number three, how can I systemize it? So the first thing you should look at is what are the outcomes that I want for this team? So if this team is there to, I don't know, sell whatever technology we have, and our values are, I mean, I hate things like integrity and stuff
Yeah.
like that. 'Cause
Yeah.
who turns up with no integrity? I mean,
Yeah.
I know some people do, but
They should be
generally
part of
most
the
people
DNA
don't.
anyway, right? That's the
Yeah.
thing. Like,
But the key thing here is think about what are the outcomes that I want and how do I want these things to be achieved? Start with that and then work your way back to the systems. So, for example, if you've got really high targets, you need this team to deliver X, Y, and Z. That means that we're going to need to have high degrees of accountability and ownership. If I want to foster that in the team, I'm going to say to my team in our one-to-ones, which will happen weekly or bi-monthly or whatever it is, you own the agenda. Because now I've communicated to that team that actually this is what I expect of you, and this is how we're going to foster that within the way that we work.
Yeah.
The important thing is because everyone's got so much on, you have to actually when I talk about operationalizing and systemizing it, you have to integrate all of these outcomes that you want into how you actually work. So that's in the one-to-ones, that's in the team meetings, that's in your quarterly reviews. So for example, in the team meetings, or forget team meetings for a second, if I want to make sure that people are continually learning and developing, because again, that means that I know that they will then be able to deliver the targets because they're very high. I need them to grow as the targets grow. I might introduce something like Drop Everything Thursday, where everybody in the team drops everything for the day and they focus on learning and development in pursuit of the goal that we're trying to achieve. So again, it's all about systemizing, operationalizing, but for the leader, you've got to role model it.
Yeah.
If you
Yeah.
are running on a ticket of high integrity, that means you do the right things when nobody's looking.
Yeah,
That's really what we're
yeah.
talking about here. And it
Yeah.
really does come from the top. You do set the tone. The most successful teams, the most successful leaders that I work with are the ones where the leaders are the change that they seek to see. And I know how challenging that can be, because in any system, no matter how brilliantly in your department you create that system, you are part of a bigger ecosystem. And when your colleagues, other department heads, are not showing up in that way, that has a profound impact on how you and your team work. And the last point I want to make about systems is we've talked about systems that are designed, but there are hidden systems in organizations. So there are systems that very clearly communicate to us, you do this, you'll get rewarded in this way. But then there are the hidden and untalked about systems, like how Dave in accounts is a leader of the finance team. And so he loves people who works the all-nighters. So when people do work the all-nighters, he's like, yeah, well done. But you know who gets promoted? The people who work the all-nighters. That's not written in the values. That's not on the wall in the organization. That's not said anywhere else. But everybody knows that that is what it takes in order to do well in Dave's team. And that's exactly what people are going to do. So I think as leaders, we are busy. There is a lot going on. But it's really important that we reduce the risk of uneven performance. We've reduced the risk of high levels of disengagement in the organization by actually creating systems that we have the power to be able to control. And where we don't have the power to be able to control them, we need to leverage other people in the organization that can help us to formulate the systems that will actually drive the outcomes and the output that we want.
Yeah, I think thanks for sharing that framework, and you created some really interesting thoughts around that. So, organizations are like living systems, right? So they're living and breathing in these micro moments of performance and measuring performance. So I think quite often, we've sort of forgotten to sort of speed up how we measure performance versus the new living system organization. And I think that's probably a whole other topic to discuss. But I want to touch on human connections, and I want to touch on how you build better human connections in like today's blurred line organization where people are working from home, and I know in the UAE now they've announced that potentially a lot of companies should work from home, even just to alleviate the traffic and the infrastructure that's causing a lot of pain for people. So maybe a lot of companies are going to push people to work from home for 3 days a week. How do we create better human connections, in your opinion? And this is an open conversation for the panel in today's blurred line organization.
I'll start with this one, right? I always feel it's about authenticity, really. Like if you have known pieces of information and you have unknown pieces of information, and you have to show up as yourself. And it's not complicated, honestly speaking. Like to build a relationship is to show up, remember the human behind the system. There is always a person. And the way that I have led my teams very successfully is before I go towards enforcing policy, because HR is always seen as the policy police. Before I even go there, I know my policy, but what is actually happening with the person? Why is it that they're not delivering, or they're showing up late, or whatever it is? We don't know what's happening behind the scenes. People have a life. And now we don't even talk about work-life balance. We talk about work-life integrity, because there are blurred lines that cross over with the instant messaging systems, etc. But understand and be human about it. If I know that my team member has worked till 11 o'clock at night to deliver something, I don't expect them to show up at 8:30 in the morning. That's really about building trust. And Sharon talked about this, right? It's about results. What gets measured, you know if your team is performing because it shows in the results. If someone is not delivering, you will see it in their results. You don't even need to constantly monitor them. The team is not performing. You haven't hit your targets. So really, it's connection to me is about being malleable as well, and about being flexible. Like, we live in a VUCA world. We talk about the volatility and the uncertainty in this world. Focus on your results. This is what we have to deliver, and then design your teams accordingly, because the requirements vary, the competencies vary from department to department. In accounting, detail oriented, you miss a zero, someone's going to commit suicide, whereas in a marketing department, you need more creativity. And how do you foster the environment that makes people
Yeah.
thrive and deliver?
Yeah. It's a good.
I think just building what Vinita has said, I think this is about intentionality. You have to be intentional if you want to foster connection, but I think connection has to be balanced with accountability. So there are three intelligences that I think leaders need right now. The first one is emotional intelligence. That's your ability to be able to understand your emotions and understand the emotions of others. The second one is relational intelligence. Relational intelligence is your ability to be able to not just build relationships, but foster connection with other people on a human to human level. But it also is about being able to see things from other people's perspectives and being able to see patterns and systems. That's what relational intelligence gives
Yeah.
you. Crucial right now in a world of change. And the third intelligence is cultural intelligence. Cultural intelligence is your ability to be able to understand people from different cultures, because we all work differently. Our motivations are different, our beliefs are different. All of these things that I'm describing are about humanity.
Yeah.
As a chief heart officer, as I always say to my clients, people are the heart of your organization. The culture is the heartbeat that drives the growth of that organization. And if we want teams to be high performing, there has to be that level of humanity. And like I said previously, you've got to be intentional about designing it in the way you show up. Your one-to-ones are not just about getting through a list of an agenda. It is, hello, how are you? How are things going? Truly listening, not fixing, listening. In
Yeah.
your team meetings, do you have an appreciation round for the first 5 minutes? What are we shouting out? Who are we? What are we bringing to the table today? In our quarterly reviews and our all hands meetings, are we even talking about the humanity, or are we talking just about the metrics and the measurement? Organizations are living, like you said, Prem, living
Yeah.
systems, ecosystems, but those living ecosystems are full of human beings. We are flawed, we are messy, we are emotional. And I
That's
think
it.
that many organizations,
Yeah.
many leaders tend to stay away from that emotional side. It's like it gets in the way. Actually, that's
Yeah.
exactly
Because
what's going to fuel your growth.
Yeah, because they're like focused on more like the task and the goals, right? Because you have to achieve you got pressure from the board, you got pressure
Of
from
course.
customers, you got all sorts. But just on that, you made some really good points about those different sort of the emotional intelligence, the relational intelligence, and the cultural one, and trying to manage and navigate that in your brain as a leader, and how you learn about that, as an aspiring leader becomes a really interesting dynamic, because you have to learn fast. You've got to think on your feet as well, really quickly. I
And
just
and
want
this is
to,
about training, right?
yeah,
We cannot expect people to come
yeah,
into leadership positions just because they were technically very good in their
that's it.
department and then
Yeah,
suddenly be like, and now you're a leader.
yeah, that's
Woohoo.
true. That's true.
Like, I mean,
Yeah,
this is about training, this is about coaching, this is
yeah,
about self-learning, self-awareness. And again, but all of these things will only happen, one,
yeah,
if organizations invest in this, but two, if there are the systems that actually tell them that this is what you need in order
yeah.
to
Agreed.
succeed.
Agreed.
So it all comes back down to how we design
Yeah,
the organization in order to achieve the outcomes and the output that we actually
yeah,
want.
yeah. It's a really good point. I
You
just
know,
want to bring
Sharon,
a question that Rima's put forward. So let's so I'm gonna just read out the question just to bring Rima's question. So how can leaders build trust with employees who maintain strong professional boundaries and aren't naturally open with their employer?
I'll
So,
I'll answer that. Boundaries needs to be designed, right? And there's nothing that is like I set my boundaries in isolation of how I said it with you, Prem, right? So
Right.
actually, technically, we sit and design the relationship, but also the boundaries. And people aren't meant to have open boundaries all the time, the open
Mm.
door policies and all these things, which I disagree with, by the way. So, and it doesn't have to be porous, right? But you'll have to design how you communicate with this person. And you don't have necessarily to communicate with one team member the same way you communicate with others. You're still the same person. You still
Yeah.
have the same leadership style, but it's a different communication. So, uh,
Mm.
strong boundaries also need to be discussed when they're actually standing in the way of communicating with the employee. And if you ask me, I'll tell you there's no such thing as strong boundaries. This is what it is. It's someone who's trying to protect themselves from the other person, and that also involves a conversation of why this is happening. Trust, the way I see it, and it is a sad story that we're trying to change. People are trying to be safe from each other's, and it's meant to be safe with each
Mm.
other's.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, and
Actually,
that
good
touches on
point.
like psychological safety, right? Like I will trust you as much as I feel safe with you. And I think people do have personal boundaries, you know. It's like I don't believe that someone has to share their personal story at work. I'm here to deliver. Some employees like to deliver. And to me, the
Mm.
best data point is the results that you deliver. If the employee is delivering what they're supposed to, they're not disruptive, they are not preventing or they're not sabotaging others from sharing their personal selves, that's absolutely fine. I think it becomes an issue if the delivery stops or if they're not sharing information that's required. That's the problem. But just because someone has some personal boundaries and
Yeah.
is not comfortable, because you don't know their story, maybe they've been scarred in the past by sharing too much of themselves, and that may have backfired. So it's
Yeah.
really about understanding and saying, you know, and giving them the time and space. I was in that situation. I had a manager come in and who wanted to be best friends with me in the beginning. And I was like, no, I don't know you. You have to earn my trust first. I mean, you've been here for 2 months, and absolutely not, because I had been burnt in the past. And then
Mm.
slowly over time, the trust did develop, but it took time.
Yeah, look, most people don't want to be best buddies with their line manager or their director of the department, right? You're not going to be best friends, but you got
And
to
you know,
how
it,
do you balance the professional and then the personal, right? At the end of the day, not to take things personally when there are certain things done in the business. But I think again that's becoming a bit of a blurred line because
Yeah,
people,
can I come in on this, Prem,
yeah,
as a chief heart
sure,
officer? Because obviously, a lot of what I do is
yeah,
about building connection with people. I think the first thing we need to think about is you've got to meet people where they are. It's not about how I want them to be treated, it's about
mm,
how they want to be treated. And as a leader, my job is to understand the drivers and the motivations, the beliefs that each of those team members have. And anytime I've gone into any organization, whether as the consultant or when I led teams, the first thing I would do is sit down with each individual member and talk to them, understand them, seek to understand. My job wasn't to make them my best friend. My job was to seek to understand them, to understand what drives them and why they're at work and what they want to achieve in their lives. And then my job as that leader of that team was to help them to get to where they want to get
yeah,
to in their
yeah,
lives, in their careers. And I can't force them. Some people want to share, others don't, and that's okay. The key thing is, though, I think that we have misunderstood things like human leadership, vulnerability. It's as if everybody needs to sit there and tell everybody about their
mm,
tale of woe and all the terrible things that happen
yeah,
to them. That's not what this is about. It's really about understanding who we are and why we're here and what we want to achieve. The key thing is with a team is that it's the sum of the parts. The sum of the parts is greater than the individuals.
mm,
It's about how are we collectively going to work together in order to achieve these outcomes. And I think for that, you have to have open and honest conversations with your team about things like How do you want to set boundaries? How do you want to be disagreed with? How do we align even if we are disagreeing? Like, I think those are the kind of open and honest conversations you
Yeah.
need to have with people so that when you are under pressure, you have the shorthand and you have the instruction manual for that team. As a chief heart officer, I come in and I have a different approach, and that's okay. That's authentic to me. I say I start with trust. I start with trust, which means I trust you. You're on my team. I trust you. If you want to keep that trust, you've got to maintain it. The moment you start to not do things that have been asked of you, we're going to have a conversation. We've already decided how we're going to have a hard conversation. So I already know how you want to be spoken to. And we're going to have that conversation. And that then becomes the connection and the accountability. An exercise in response to what Rima asked for, you could use with your team is something I use. It's called the washing instructions exercise. So I know it sounds very strange. I'll just explain it very quickly before we close the session. On your clothes, there will be a label, and on that label has a set of washing instructions. Wash me at 40 degrees. Don't put me in the tumble dryer. I'm delicate. What if we all came to the workplace with our own set of washing instructions? It is a one-pager that I've designed in which people can write down what is it that they're working on? What are the things that they love? What motivates them? How do they like to work? When do they like to have meetings? When do they not want to be disturbed? It's a one-pager, it's a manual that tells people how they like to work and how they like to show up. And it's a great tool to be able to use with your teams, because then you can more quickly build trust, but fundamentally understand who the people are on your team. We're not trying to make everybody be the same. We're trying to draw out the best of everyone so that we can get to the best outcomes. And the washing instructions are the great guide to be able to do that.
I've not heard of that one before, but that's another new one today. Yeah, thanks, Sharon. Washing instructions. Yeah, I mean, I can imagine. But the thing is, there's just so much to think about. And Vinita, you mentioned we're in this VUCA world, right? Everything is uncertain, volatile, change every day. Even the word change probably needs to change because it's like every single day. But you've got all of that to contend with, and then you're a leader or a manager with teams, and you've got all these other things that you've got to think about all the time. So your head is constantly filled with, how do I engage my team? I need to deliver this. I need to, engage the leaders. I need to build better human connections. I've got to think about the conversation separately that I have with every individual, whether it's peers or collaborators, team members, whatever. Just how does one deal with this every single day? When you
Yeah,
get
I mean, it's a part of being in a leadership role, right? And not even, you don't even have to be in a leadership role to face this. Employees do as well. So one of the tools that I've always used is the Eisenhower matrix, where you actually prioritize your tasks into, like, is it urgent and important? That's something for you to work on. Is it not urgent, but it's important? These are things like strategy, relationship building, that needs to be scheduled. And not urgent and not important, throw it out the window, eliminate it, because leaders and employees as well spend a lot of time firefighting. That's a planning issue. And we do live in a part of the world where planning is not a forte. Where, and I think I would draw inspiration from Germany, where they take a very long time to plan something, but then the execution is with precision. And I think the challenge with not planning is you're constantly firefighting. And that's where miscommunication can happen, conflicting communication will happen, right? So in terms of really organizing, and you can't do everything all the time. So I think what I've trained my managers to do is to pick one thing a week. Maybe one week you have meetings. I want to meet people. I want to understand them. I want to talk to them. I just want to connect. Week 1 is that. Week 2 would be your strategy. Week 3 would be focusing on the managing up, so meeting with your stakeholders, understanding what's important to them. And then week 4 is taking all of that information and making a plan with it. That's how you go into your next month. So this is an effective tool.
Yeah, we got definitely a few tools shared today. Look, I'm just conscious of sort of time and to wrap up very, very soon. Rose, we've talked about a lot of things today in terms of leadership effectiveness, the building trust, the human connection, the engagement of employees, and it's becoming even more important now to keep employees engaged. One stats that I heard recently was that only 30% of people working around the globe are actually thriving. So 70% have actually got some kind of challenge in the workplace, that they're not, a bit of unhappiness, sadness, they're not productive. But what is that one piece of sort of advice, as one of our panelists, Rose, you want to give to the audience right now, for and what can they go away to challenge their organization system, and how they can relate that to their respective leaders? What's your one bit of advice?
Start early. Start as soon as you onboard a new organization, or whether you're a leader onboarding, you're joining, or you have a team member that is joining. Start from day one. And that's exactly what I tell my clients. You've got 60 days to have boundaries in place, to have the safe place being created, to have that platforms that I have evoked, and to design communication, relationship, alliances. And once you're past this period, it's actually so hard to do it. So if I want to leave you with one simple advice, it would be start as soon as possible. Again, because I'm a strong believer that once trust is eroded severely or corroded, there's no way back.
Okay.
And the name of our webinar is How to Rebuild. And
Yeah.
I would say, like, prevent it, preempt it, because rebuilding it is so hard and sometimes impossible. So we'd better put it in place before
Yeah.
anything else
It's a really
happens.
good point. Thank you for that. Vinita, what's your one sort of key message or a piece of advice?
Mine is that remember the human behind the system. It's up to all of us to humanize the workplace. What's missing today is we think our people are machines born for delivery. We're not designed for that. If we were born to deliver all the time, we would have been born in motion. We're not. We need to be, after we're born, we have a period of time that we need to be looked after. So remember the human behind the system, and also assume good intention.
Excellent. Love that. And last but not least, Sharon, what's your piece of advice?
So if I'm a leader and I'm seeing that my people aren't reaching their goals, there's 3 things that I would be asking myself. The first one is, do I have a systems gap? Have I created the systems, the environment in order for them to be able to succeed? The second thing is, do I have a trust gap? Where is it that the kind of sharing of information and the fact that people aren't speaking up, where is that coming from? And the third one is, do I have a skills gap? Because actually, is it that the people in my team, and maybe even myself, don't actually have the right mindset and skill set in order to be able to create the environment and the outcomes that we want? I would say, don't blame people. Don't make this about pointing fingers at them or saying that person is broken. Look at the environment that they're operating in and ask yourself, what's actually stopping my people from achieving their goals? And what can I do to change it? And actually, that gives you agency and it gives you hope, because that's what we need right now. We
That's
need
right.
agency, we
You're
need
right.
control in a changing world, and we all need more hope. Like Vinita said, this is about humanity. This is about people. People are the heart of your organization. Culture is the heartbeat that will drive the growth of the organization. People are really important, and it's your systems that shape the behaviors, and behaviors shape the culture, and that is what will shape the outcomes. So
Perfect.
go design it.
Yeah.
You can do it. It's in your
Amazing.
power.
Yeah, thank you for that, Sharon. This is all about coming together, unifying, and having a system that works for that group. And as you say, there's a number of systems within an organization, and it's bringing that all together and working it in a way that, really allows employees and people and teams to thrive, because and create that joy in the workplace, and create a happy place, but a happy place in the sense you can have those tough conversations, trusted conversations. You have that psychological safety. And I love the fact, Rose, you were saying about it's not about rebuilding trust, because once you've lost it, it's really hard to rebuild. So what are those preventative measures and processes and practices in place? So look, on that note, we're bang on time on this thing. So thank you, Vinita, Rose, Sharon, for sharing your insights, your best practice, your frameworks, and a few new golden nuggets I think we found in there. So we've recorded this, we'll be sharing it out. But thank you so much for sharing and spending the time with us today.
Thank you,
Thank
Prem,
you.
Sharon, and
Thank
our
you.
audience as
Yeah,
well.
and our
Thank you,
audience as
everyone.
well. Thanks for joining us. We will
Thank
issue we'll release the recording over the course of the next few days, and feel free to share it out. And I think we could have had this conversation going on a lot deeper and a lot longer. There's so much to unpick, but maybe another round of it we'll go deeper into some of the key content points. But enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye.